Hello, everyone. Good morning or good afternoon. I hope everyone is safe and healthy in these hard times we are living in. My name is Vânia Ferramacho, and I am a solution architect in the Fast Track team. And I'm here today. I'm here today to discuss about data management with Microsoft Dataverse. Microsoft Dataverse is CDS renamed, so we'll be using this new terminology in this session. The goal for the session is to discuss ways to interact with our data and show that nowadays we don't need to have all data inside the CRM box, but we can use other systems to integrate with Dynamics, and then we can visualize it inside Dynamics. So for the agenda, we will discuss these three areas: data strategy, cloud approach with data, and T-SQL data access. So with increasing data volume in our systems, how should we consider data usage, right? So it's important to see the type of data we are working with, where we are using the data, what are we trying to do with that, and ultimately, what will we like to achieve from it. About the cloud approach with data. So Power Platform now has multiple approaches to consume data. So here we will try to discuss some of the options we have available in the market. And the last one, T-SQL data access. We are introducing a new capability with T-SQL access. So we will see at the end the opportunities that these will bring to all of us. So data strategy. So what do we want from an application? So when you think about the solution application, we need to understand what do we want from it. Sometimes it's important to leave just for some instance the technical part behind and think about what we would like to have or get from the solution. Because at the end of the day, data inside CRM is just a piece of it, right? So what we really want? So we want knowledge, insights, and the processes around the data. So we want knowledge, so facts that exist or happen. We want to know everything about our customers, the products they sell, everything around them. We want also insights. So we want to know what are the business likes and dislikes. And we also want a bit of governance. So in this process piece, so how customers' data is being consumed and modified in a daily basis. For example, for a salesperson, the salesperson will work with the sales process, right? So he will have customer information and will benefit of the sale insights the solution can provide to him. Looking to another example, like the bank institutions, maybe the important process for them is to focus on the fraud system, understand how the transactions are being recorded in the system, and perhaps how can they have insights about that transaction. So depends obviously on the business we are working with. So using Dynamics as the only record system is not the best idea right now. So we must look to take advantage of other opportunities in the cloud. So what data do we have? So we need to break our data. Okay, so we have these three categories. So master data, transactional data, and inferred data. So what type of data do we have in the system? So which one do we see or work in a daily basis? So for master data is a very important category. So it represents data about the business entities that provide us the context of business transactions. This master data doesn't change that often. It has usually low volume and represents real-world entities like organization, their employees, users, customer products, or sometimes even financial structure. This is highly regulated. We can change it without any approval. So these data usually don't change. For the transactional data, so these are events that are related with the master data and can be created manually or automatically, like email activities, for example, that are created when someone answers to an email. Or using the same example from the bank institutions. So when we want to track all the credit card transactions. So rather than being the object of transactions, like the product being purchased, it is more of a reference data describing time, places, payments, all the information inside the sales transaction. And the last one, the inferred data. So this is automatic data that is generated based on the others, so master and transactional, and maybe target of several different interpretations like social media posts that we have currently nowadays. So it's important to understand that data is not all the same, right? And it can lead to different approaches based on data category. So before we start to think who and how we can consume data, we need to understand what we have, what data we have, and how we can categorize it. Okay, so we don't need to have all data in Microsoft Dataverse database to consume it. So things to have in mind. So is our data volatile, right? So does it change every 5 or 10 minutes? Will data change before we have the chance to work with? Okay, so we can have information stored, but when users are going to use, it's completely outdated and they can't do anything with that. So how reliable the data that we store is, right? So another piece that is very important is the volume. So imagine you have billion transactions on it. It doesn't make sense to stay inside the Microsoft Dataverse database, but makes sense to be visible just to some personas and understand how you can consume this data. It is also a very important piece. So about the evolution of data, the range and volume of data is increasing every day. Data latency is becoming more critical in multi-channels in this digital communication era we are living in. So for example, in a segmentation for marketing, maybe 5 or 10 minutes or even 15 minutes latency doesn't bring any harm, okay, for the output. But in a fraud detection, in a fraud system, maybe this won't work since we need to see specific actions that just happen. And with 15 minutes outdated, we won't have that particular action that we would like to find. So this means one size does not fit all, right? Particularly with AI and IoT, data volumes growing, but with higher volume comes need for more insights. Otherwise, we won't have any productive output from a large set of data. So what does data leads to? So we need to interpret what we want to do with the data we store. So we need to view the data. That is absolutely fine, right? So we must understand our customers end to end. It's the 360 vision we have in place to see the entire customer journey. But again, we don't need to have all the data stored in Microsoft Dataverse. So data triggers actions and maybe the event itself or some interpretation of an event. like examples of that fraud detection. So if there is a suspect transaction, that will trigger an action. Or, for example, in an insurance company, for example, we can use IoT to monitor the heating temperature in specific places, like a clinic, schools, and IoT will monitor to see if the temperature goes high or down. Um, uh, to the value that was configured, and as soon as it reach that value, it will trigger an action, right? So we will need to interpret those, and Insight will assist us. So humans simply can cover all transactions. It's not human possible. And computers can find patterns that humans can't. So this large data can be analyzed and presented to users in a meaningful way, but that doesn't mean data and the process logic behind it needs to be in the same place to achieve that. Okay, it can be stored in separate places. So cloud data management here is, once we understand the data and how we can consume it, we can start to think about how to manage it, right? So the typical design issues that we have here is some of the issues that we have as fast track team. We have seen with our customers and partners in the projects that we are engaged with. So lots of people treats Microsoft Dataverse as an infinite black box, and this is a misconception, right? So we do have several solutions that were designed for large data, like Data Lake or CosmoDB. Okay, so those were designed for large data, not Microsoft Dataverse. So Microsoft Dataverse Core is a SQL database, and it has its limitations, right? So we are continuing to improve the SQL DB, okay, but there are some limitations that will still be there, will still be present. So customers are also designing the integration based on the least coding rather than least processing, okay, and they are still not paying considerations to the underlying SQL query complexity. At the same way, we are seeing asks about doing heavy computing in Microsoft Dataverse. We can use Power Automate or Visual Tools instead for that purpose. If you are doing a heavy process in the background, and you have an employee from a call center trying to open a record, while so he's in on the phone with a customer that's just dial in, okay, and then he tries to open the record for that customer, and since we are doing heavy process in the background, he might have an error opening the record, or he might see some performance issues, and the record keeps loading, but nothing happens, so it doesn't finalize. So this will cause problems in the daily operations, right? So he will experience a performance situation, not because the product is not doing what he requested, but because we are using the box for having process in the background. We also see unnecessary data being stored in Microsoft Dataverse, okay, so often perceived to be required for read-only access or reporting-only purposes, okay, or even acting as a stage environment before data is transformed and loaded again to the real entities. Other scenarios that we also see is that some projects are treating CRM as a data warehouse. Okay, so again, for reporting here too, but as you know, reporting results in expensive queries against Microsoft Dataverse that can impact both users and any integration scenarios that you might have in place. So here we are trying to move to a model where we need to protect customers and provide them a different experience to gain access to their data. We do have several tools available in the cloud, so it's better to have data in the correct place and have efficient access to it through the available tools, right? So we are trying to move to a model where we can provide good design behaviors, okay? If you are a user in Dynamics, you should be able to access to your data there, okay? But the mechanisms to achieve that don't need to be inside Microsoft Database to provide that. It's important to understand that customer wants to see his data inside Dynamics, okay? And it's absolutely reasonable to want that, okay? But the key point here is to show that data doesn't need to be within the Microsoft Dataverse database to achieve that, but can be stored in another place and then integrate with Dynamics, okay? So with that integration, users can visualize the data inside Dynamics, but it is stored elsewhere. Okay, so we have lots of tools available in the cloud that we can use to integrate data with Dynamics. So success by design. So success by design is the framework that the Fast Track team uses. So we are trying to do what we are trying to do in the Fast Track team is to assist everyone, customers and partners, to have a successful implementation and to try to have people using the platform in an efficient way. Okay, so make sure they are using the solution with the best out of it, okay, while they experience while they have the best experience. So we are enforcing tools to identify good and bad behaviors to try to eliminate the bad behaviors, okay? So we have implemented solution checker, okay? So eventually we will enforce good behaviors is running it against our solutions. Then API limits, so we are continuing working on this. And product design, so we are trying to build service to drive good behavior here too, with automatic index, managed solution, and so on. So what is the right tool to use, right? So there are multiple components that can play a significant part in the overall architecture. So we have here master data, events, volume data, and obviously we have Microsoft Dataverse here first for viewing master data and transactional data. We can then integrate it with Power Automate, okay, to automate actions outside and inside Dynamics and bring the output to Dynamics again when it is useful for users to use. Similarly, we can react in Microsoft Dataverse from Power Automate and act elsewhere. So in the opposite to what we did before with the workflows and plugins where data had to be inside Dynamics to trigger any action. For huge amount of data, we can use Data Lake and Power BI for some insights and analysis. Power BI will consume directly data from Azure Data Lake, okay? And on top of that, we can use customer insights, okay, to perform also analysis, but this type of very big, large volumes of direct and inferred data. Like Power BI, Customer Insights gets information also directly from Azure Data Lake, okay? So here on the CDM, so Common Data Model is a standard schema taxonomy around our data, right? So we have these in our apps like Sales App, Power Apps, and so many others that we have available. So having a common data is essential. So all applications can share the same context, and these also used outside Dynamics. So using other apps, we can use the same base and integrate data easily. There's no separation between the solutions like sales and Power Platform or even customer insights. So they will all read the same information if they need. Okay, so we store data and we can read it from several different places. Okay. So as said before, common data model is a shared data model that allows applications and data integrators to move easily to more easily interoperate by providing a unified definition of data. Common data model includes a rich metadata system with standard entities, relationships, hierarchies, and so on. So one of the reasons for us to be using these is our ISV, so our partners. So if they need to use the data, they can use it, and we can use the ISV on top of our solutions. So the two parties will integrate easily. For example, sales insight can consume marketing output and vice versa. So marketing output can consume sales insight data too. And that is only possible because we have a common data model in the background. Okay. In terms of data, we do have lots of options, and each with different benefits and constraints. So here on the user interface integration, you can create Canvas apps to have rich visualizations for the data you need. You can have embedded or standalone apps. For example, for embedded Canvas-driven app, you can have an app in a shopping mall, for example, or in a restaurant to alert you when is your turn, for example. Or you can create also a standalone Canvas-driven app, and that can be for if you want to buy a ticket for a concert, for example. So you can just be that purpose. Then you have Power BI embedded or standalone. So visualization in Dynamics, but data won't be stored there. So you are just bringing the visualization into we then have the option to integrate data using data flows into Azure Data Lake. We also have Power Automate. Customer insights are another example of how you can integrate data. So how you can use that data that is not inside Dynamics, but can be visualized in Dynamics. So analysis integration. Okay. So this is analysis report approach. Okay, so analysis solution approach will depend always on the context of usage. Okay, so reports need to be carefully analyzed and see what exactly needs to be inside that report. We can have reports defined at organization level with huge amount of aggregated data. But on the other hand, we need to understand if we need real-time data on that report, or if we can work with some outdated information. Okay, so depends on the user roles. Okay, maybe the CEO needs information about last month, for example, but the call center manager needs from this week. Okay, so it depends on the user roles, of course, but it's key to understand what are the type of scenarios and roles and the data that needs to be combined into every report. The data needed in the organization report, like I was mentioned, won't be useful for the call center manager. On the other hand, customer service manager to retrieve data requires other security context too, and small data sets. Okay, so it's completely different from the report created for at organization level. And we have several ways to accomplish this data. So we have here Dynamics 365 with Microsoft Dataverse and customer insights and sales insights. And we also have Power BI embedded or using Power BI data flows. We can also use Office 365 and ISVs from our partners. And lastly, we have Azure Data Services, where we have several services embedded. So we have machine learning, data warehousing. So depends on what you would like to do with your data. So here, Power BI architecture. So Power BI allow us to bring data from external sources. It supports connections to several sources like it is illustrated here. So here on the slide with all these data connectors. Here it's up to 160, but it's more than 160. So before we speak about T-SQL, okay, I would like to discuss how Power BI works. So Power BI consume data in two ways. The first one is in the import mode, and the other one is direct query mode. And on the import mode, so this mode is supported by all the connectors, so we can bring data from different sources at the same time. We can pre-aggregate and make it available for users. It's pretty good. However, we have seen some constraints in some projects. We received some feedback from our customers where, for example, data was not in real time. It's okay, data is in the report and it is can be refreshed. The advantage is that once in the report, users can consume it in a very efficient way, but it will be out of date very quickly. And the other constraint that we saw is that so the query will run in the context of the report author, and then other users that are using this report, they will see the data for using the permissions of that report author, okay, not their own permissions. So this is not suitable. We have ways to work around this, like row-level security, but with high volumes of data and high number of users, this is not practical to implement. And this leads to the other mode, so the direct query mode. So the direct query mode is so it queries the data nearly in real time in the context of the user executing the report. Okay, not the author, but the ones that are executing the report. So Microsoft Dataverse connector doesn't support it like the rest of the connectors, but the T-SQL connector does it. Okay, so the drive here is to open T-SQL connector in Power BI to allow users to query Microsoft Dataverse data from Power BI in real time using the security context. Okay, and this leads us to the T-SQL capability, the last piece of the session. Here, so what is this, the T-SQL? So basically, this is a SQL data connection, okay, is available on the Microsoft Dataverse endpoint. Okay, the SQL connection provides read-only access to the entity data of the target environment. Allows you to write and execute SQL queries against the entity data table. Okay, and the real drive behind all these is to allow access with direct query to near real-time data and enabling real-time reporting via Power BI. This feature is still in preview, okay, preview mode. So we are still learning from it and adding capabilities. By default, T-SQL is turned off in the environment, so you will have to enable TDS endpoint for a specific environment. You just need to go to PPAC, Power Platform Admin Center, and go to your environment and enable it. You just need to do once, so you do at organization level. So how does it work? So it uses TDS endpoint, so tabular data stream endpoint. It's a protocol that communicates with the Microsoft Dataverse web service. It doesn't allow any write operation. It has only read access. So this means that any operation that attempts to modify data like updates, inserts, will not work, as this is just a read-only SQL data connection. So it uses SQL language to query filtered views, supports operations like selects, normal selects, aggregation functions, unions, joins. Okay. About the throttling and API request limit. So these queries will count against your throttling and API request limit. So you will need to have this in mind too when you are creating those queries. Security and mechanisms. So the security and authentication. So Microsoft Dataverse Endpoint SQL connection uses the dynamic security model for data access. So data can be obtained for all entities to which a user has access already in Dynamics. Only Azure Active Directory Authentication is supported, so SQL authentication and Windows authentication are not supported right now. And to do the connection, you just need to go to the Management Studio and after the server name, just add the port 5558, okay, and you will open a connection if TDS is enabled in the organization. So Power BI here is the primary goal at the moment. Okay, so you can use Power BI desktop to view tables in Microsoft Dataverse. Okay, so the table raw data that you can access from your environment is read-only. Okay. So we are going to extend in other areas such as the console applications, the Excel reporting services, and like I was saying before, so you can use SQL Server Management Studio to use this connection. So the SQL Server Management Studio version 18.4 is the minimum built to maintain this connection. So limitations. There are some limitations that come along with it, right? So we right now there is no support for temp tables or store procedures. These query execution plans are also not available here. We can only read information in the Microsoft Dataverse database, so there is no audit access here. Okay, we don't have access, and we don't have available linked databases too. So since we query the filter views, we don't need to have access to principal object access table. Okay, and as I said before, so while accessing, we are using dynamic security model. So we don't see any needs of accessing to this table. Things to be aware for now, and don't forget that we are still working on it, but we would like to highlight on the performance field. First, the load is going direct to the database. Second, query filtered views perform very well. However, this will depend on the database you have, and you might see some performance degradation. Regarding the time conversion, so converting to UTC or from UTC to local time will likely create performance challenges too. And actions like ordering sometimes by option sets and entity lookup values using a name instead of GUIDs are the examples that where you can see performance issues. You can have performance challenges. To summarize, the tool was not designed to heavy and complex queries, right? So T-SQL is for light queries, simple and quick to be run in the user context. Heavy and complex queries usually found in the reporting service should be using data flow and taking the data into the data lake and use the respective tools over there. So key takeaways before we finish the call. So Power BI is where you have the best experience for reporting. It's a first party for reporting. It's where we provide the most integrated experience. So have direct query for low volume reporting, import mode for larger volumes. For large data sets or complex queries, for example, customer insights, sales insights, AI, we recommend to use data flow. Okay, and for simple queries and queries that are in need of near real-time results, we strongly recommend you to try our new feature, the T-SQL for Microsoft Dataverse. Okay, so I have here some couple of links that are helpful and describe a little bit more about T-SQL and how you can connect and some examples to use inside Power BI and Management Studio. And we reached the end of this session. So I hope you have enjoyed the session. So I hope the message that we would like to share was clear. So it's very important to understand nowadays that the data is very big, and we having all the data stored in the CRM box, it's not the best idea. Okay, so we have lots of tools available in the cloud where we can store the data, and we can easily using our connectors, we can easily integrate it with Microsoft Dataverse. Okay, so we can visualize that information in the Dynamics box. Okay, so I hope you have enjoyed as much as I did, and thank you and have a great day.